everybody. If you can find me on the screen, I'm waving to you from Washington, D.C. in my basement where we're doing our best to stay safe in these difficult times. I hope everybody, you and your families are doing well. Thank you for starting with that video. That's energizing and makes me want to just get into it. But I see many familiar faces from the times I've gotten to spend at KER and other places. But my name is Stephen Farr. I work with an organization called Teach for All, which is a network of organizations like Teach for India. There's 54 countries that have organizations like Teach for India. And I work in a small group called the Global Learning Lab that looks to learn from each other in that network. And really, it's, I could go into so much about the personal journey, but I'll just introduce myself mainly by saying I have been on a personal journey of thinking about, I used to think that the way we're going to solve problems in education is by focusing on teachers. And over time, I think I'm wrong, that we're going to solve problems in education by changing the ways we focus on students and work with them. And I want to, my role today is going to be to bring out the wisdom of several people that we have here with us. And I will ask some questions and I'll challenge a few things, but mostly I want to hear from you all. So could we just find those folks and ask you, this is the 1 or 2 minute just quick introduction. Who are you? What are you doing? And why have you been brought to this panel? This is not the moment for humility. What are you doing that is going to contribute to a conversation about students' leadership and students' involvement in reimagining education? I wonder, Pooja, can I start with you and ask you to go first?
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Pooja. I'm from Chennai and I'm a 12th grader. I believe that just like movies and popcorn and how they make such a good combination, education should consist of like teachers and students for that to become a good experience. And what I did was that I helped redesign education for a rural school along with my school teachers. And I'm continuing to do that, but not just for that rural school, but also for slum communities around Chennai near my school. So we're redesigning what education could look like for them during the lockdown. And yeah, that is just summing up what I do. And I hope that I can contribute perspectives of how being in a space with equal partnership has really helped me personally, and I hope I can learn the same from the teachers over here and students over here.
Welcome. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you. Rajshri, how are you today?
Fine, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Tell us about you and your work. Quick introductions.
Hi, everyone. So lovely to be here in this space. I'm Rajshri. I'm in Mumbai. And I would say Mumbai is my Janam and Karma Bhumi, but my work takes me across India. Because I lead TFIX, which works with entrepreneurs. I think the way I would like to look at myself, I hope that's true, is people across, whether in Teach for India, Akanksha, or people who know me, they call me Rajshri Didi. And I think I've always been a Didi. And I think that's the reason I'm here, because I think through my journey, I've been just like an elder sister, where listening, understanding, getting to know my children. And I think I've learned so much through that journey. So I think even anything like today, I'm doing TFIX, I'm so program lead with Mumbai. I think what gets me really going is being in classroom, being with children and partnering with them all the time. And I mean, I would at some point love to understand what does partnering mean, but I think that's what I would say, that just being with children and being with them and being their Didi all the time is what keeps me going. Thank you.
Welcome, glad you're here. It's good to see you. Avinash, how are you today? Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Steven Bhaiya. May I call you Bhaiya? Yes. Okay, so I am Avinash. I am from Pune, Maharashtra. I'm studying in 12th standards right now. I have been in intervention of IT for 3 years. I have been a project leader. I have led a student-led initiative called Project IQ in my school days. So a bit of experience of taking initiative. I have seen both examples and non-examples of educators and kids being in partnership. So I can give you both the lenses. So that's what bringing me here. Yeah.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Welcome. And Jai, how are you? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you for having me here first. And I am from Pune, working in Pune with a community named Wadgaon Budruk. And I like my most of the work involves with I'm part of a lot of student-led projects in the community. I would say I'm like privileged to be part of all those experiments which kids have been experimenting here in the community. And probably that's why I'm here to share some of the learnings and some of the challenges which we have faced in the journey. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to learn from you all and want to get right into it. I'm gonna ask first a question, and I know this is a little bit tricky. If there's too much silence, I'll grab someone, but I'm just gonna ask you to jump in and share if something comes to you. But let's start with the reality right now. Like when we think about this vision that you all seem to share of students being much more involved in reimagining education and being leaders, that is not how the world looks right now. That is not how schools are designed right now. And I wanted to see if I could ask you to think about the question, what's the current reality of the relationships between students and teachers, and why is it that way? And I'd like to encourage you to share a story that illustrates your answer to. So just to return to the question, I'll give you a second to think about it. What's the current landscape? What's the current reality of student-teacher relationships, and why are they like what they are? And do you have a story to share from your own experience that kind of illustrates how you think about that question? Again, I just want to ask you all to jump in as you feel the need to, or I'll call on somebody. But what comes up for you all?
So when you first asked that question, the first thing that came to my head was something that happened in my classroom back when I was in 3rd grade. And I think if I were to say the current reality right now is that, at least from a student perspective, students are way too intimidated by their teachers. And I think that intimidation is what stops us from bringing education to what it really should be. One incident was that in 3rd grade, we had a new English teacher who, from what I've heard from the other students who've already had classes with her, is extremely mean, and that she uses like physical punishments on students. And I was terrified about that, because I would be very sensitive to what a teacher says to me, because I've always been like a teacher's pet. So in classes, she just read out random vocabulary and asked us to memorize the meanings of those words immediately. And one student didn't get it right, and I saw her yell at that student so much, and I started crying. And because of that, I wasn't able to learn an English class for almost like the 8 months that I sat in that class. I was terrified, and I couldn't even listen to what the teacher was saying because I was just terrified. So I think like the biggest thing is us having like this superiority complex, or us just being scared scared of our teachers. I think that is what we are at now, and not just from my experience, but I've heard so many kids who I've worked with just say that, and I think that's what's stopping us from where we should be, from making education an enriching experience.
Thanks, Pooja. Can you go one more line deep? Like, why are students intimidated by teachers? Like, where does that come from? Where did that come from for you, and what did you do about it?
For me, it was probably just the classroom environment. I think that when the teacher walks in, instead like you have to stand up and you have to chant like "Good morning, teacher," and then if they aren't satisfied with your tone, they make you do it again and again and again. And it's sort of, I think a lot has to do with like the atmosphere that is being set in a classroom, and the idea that I'm the one who has to speak, and the very idea that a classroom has to be quiet, which is not the case at all. Because when you really learn, the classroom has to be buzzing with questions and discussions going on, which helps you dive deeper. But the idea that a classroom should be quiet, look, I'm going to say something and it is going to be useful for you, so you better learn. So I think just setting that authoritative tone, or having a very, I don't know, classroom where you just have to be submissive. And I think the whole idea of that, I don't know, just like the tone, the atmosphere, and the idea that you have to keep quiet and just take in, it's all one way thing that makes us scared to want to push our thinking and our silly doubts and stuff like that.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you. There's a couple of things I want to loop back to, but I'm watching Avinash nod his head and nod his head. What are you thinking as you hear that, Avinash? How's your response to the question, what's the current reality and why, similar and different to what you're hearing from Pooja?
Okay, so I'm going to share something from my personal experience. I have been a part of a government school, and I have been faced by corporal punishment. I have seen violence where teacher used to bring sticks to classroom and hit students when they they are noisy, they are making noise, talking in the class, and uh, and you asked what brings that fear. So the practice and the dealing with the student with the attitude of violence brings that fear. And I personally was very affected by it, because when the teacher used to use violence, I uh, used to feel down. My self confidence was down, and I feared to talk in class, raise my hand and ask questions. And uh, in 5 to 6 years in government schools, I was a very reserved student. I was not able to express myself because I was feared of that teacher using violence and hitting me. So I was very vulnerable at that point, and there was no one to hear to my suffering. So that's what bring fear.
Thank you, Avinash. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you both for the courage just to share the personal stories and how you make sense of them. I feel like half the challenge is we don't talk about what you all are talking about right now. There's just not a conversation like this among students and teachers. And I wonder, Jai and Rashri, what's going through your mind on the question of just what's the reality, what are you seeing, and why is it, and how are you making meaning of what you're hearing from these students?
Jai, would you like to go first?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Very, very crucial questions, and thanks to Pooja and Avinash for sharing so openly. I think the minute you asked me that question and the minute Pooja started talking about it, I was reminded of a child and a real situation. And he was my student, and it was the time in Akanksha where it was an after-school center. And the child was very quiet, very, very submissive, and very, very, like he wouldn't even have eye contact. And when I dug deeper, I realized this child had actually failed in his ninth grade. And when he had failed in ninth grade, he had failed in maths. And when he failed in maths in his own head, he decided, okay, this year I'm going to really do very well and I'll be the first bencher, sit right in front of the class and just get it because I don't want to fail. I want to pass and I want to get real good marks. Interestingly, he decided that in his head and he sat in front bench. But when the school principal came to welcome the new students, in front of those 80, and it's a government school, 80, 90 children, how many were there? The principal of the school, the HM of the school actually said in Hindi, I mean, I'll just speak, hey, you duffer, you've already failed once. Why are you sitting in front? You please go back and sit. And that actually played such a havoc in this child's life that it took us in Akanksha at least 4 to 5 years to bring him his self-confidence back over here. And this I'm sharing particularly is one story, but I think I have faced that. I've seen my peers face that. It's clearly because of the power dynamics that are there in the classroom. I think it's like one person who has all the knowledge and has all the power who has to give it to the others. But till there is no understanding, there is no trust, there is no relationship between everyone there, I think the actual education is never going to go ahead. And I think when we are talking about education, I really feel even when we talk about partnership, what is this partnership? This partnership is not someone like it's one-way focus. It's like both people are equal partners in this. That means both are learning from each other, both are adding value, whether it's the teacher or I would actually call the facilitator or the students out there. And that is why in our classrooms, we encourage sitting on the floor and sitting in circles. Because the idea is we all are at the same eye level. We all are on the floor. We all are the same. We all have equal opportunity and equal power. So I think the reality is very different, but this is the whole idea because it just comes with a lot of power in one person's hand. And I think it's not just that particular teacher, I would say, actually. I would say the entire system has become in this way, where even probably the facilitator is kind of pressurized that you have to give and you have to deliver and you have to create these things. Yeah.
I got it. Sorry, I've got you cut off a tiny bit there at the end, Rashi, but I think I got the end of it. Shai, are you still there? Can we hear your follow-up? Thank you for that, Rashi. I'm seeing in the chat a question I want to follow up, which was like, why is it like this? Let's keep going, and we're gonna get to that. But Shai, how are you thinking?
Yeah, like so I think I agree with what Rajshri Didi just shared, and I also just want to apologize to Pooja and Avinash for what they have felt in classroom on the behalf of all the educators who have been to their schools. And like suddenly I went back to my school days, and I think situation has been pretty same. Probably it's I would say it's better, right? Like platforms like this exist where you can come and talk about these things. I remember when I was in school, I had no courage to talk about. Probably I accepted that that's how school has like that's how schools are, and that's the role of a teacher. And I'm also thinking how this has evolved over time, right? Like in India, especially, I don't have understanding of the global education system, but in India, like if we go back to ashrams where education used to happen, even at those places, teacher used to assume the power and take that higher status in that entire society, and that's the job of the student is to just learn from the teacher. definitely at that time, students were allowed to ask their questions and to get like to develop more understanding about the world, about the life. But the system, I think, has continued where teachers assume this thing that I am the giver and student is the receiver. And maybe that responsibility of giving that's where the assumption of power also comes in the mind of all the teachers. And I think Rajshri Didi very rightly said that this power dynamics has to be broken. Where does it come from? It's passing from generation to generation, right? Like I learned from a teacher who did same to me, and probably I'm going to do the same thing unless I am exposed to some other method of the teaching, or I won't call it a facilitating, though it's a different skills. But if what I've learned from like as a teacher is like I've seen my teacher teaching in the classroom, and I try to follow them, right? So following the footstep of the teacher, I think that has continued in last few decades. Like majority of the teachers are Xerox copy of their own teachers, and I have heard a lot of teachers saying that even we faced the similar thing, and that's how we have learned, right? So the idea how a human being learn comes from how they have seen when they were students in the school, and probably that is the reason that they have continued with that method of teaching, because they have seen result with that. And unless we show them something completely different with a better results, I'm not sure if we can really change this power dynamics as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Jai. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many ways I want to go. I do see Kieran under the name Kumkum was asking for some help there. I take it Sharak Ashwa, someone is helping. I want to be sure. Yeah, great. Thank you. Be sure everyone's was able to follow. And if someone needs, if we need to slow down, or if take the time to hear where someone is, please flag and interrupt me. I'm unable to follow the chat all at the same time, but I'm gonna ask our panelists permission to do something a little strange. I'm gonna take a moment to try to embody the world's skepticism about everything you just said. I'm going to, I'd like to say pretend, but I want to acknowledge that some of the things I'm going to say I have internalized because it was the way I grew up. And I'm going to challenge the whole reason we're having this conversation and ask you to react to it. The reason I'm doing this is I worry we're all sitting here and we kind of agree this is how the world needs to be, but the reality is the world doesn't agree. And there are a lot of pressures pushing against what's happening here, and I want to put those on the table. So with your permission, I am going to try to give voice to what I think the world actually thinks about this, and then ask you to tear it apart, come back at it, okay? Okay, let's see. You all are having a conversation about students changing education. Are you kidding me? The reason students are students is because they don't know enough yet. Right? Children are children. They're growing. Their brains aren't fully developed yet. The idea that we're going to hand over power to children and students in a world where already students are too far behind, it's the opposite of what needs to happen. Even if you do, no one's listening to kids. Like, fine, Poojan like has all these ideas. They're not actually going to have an influence because they're kids. That's the way the world works, right? And like, of course we need quiet classrooms, because what children need to learn is to be quiet and do what they need to do, because that's what their jobs are going to ask of them. And so, I mean, it just seems like a total disservice. loud classrooms. Are you kidding? We're going to have kids all over the place, undisciplined, and then they're not going to be able to get jobs and they're not going to be able to contribute to society. You're setting up a total disaster. Also, it's just like, it's dangerous, right? I mean, you all are talking about teachers with corporal punishment. We're encouraging you not to do what they're asking so you get hurt. No, that doesn't make any sense. Our job is to protect you as children, and we need to create a safe space, and that means not using children to challenge dynamics of power. That doesn't make any sense. That just is unfair to you as children. So what you're talking about makes no sense at all. Okay, there's the word, world, speaking to you. Speak back to the world.
There are so many things I want to say. Can I take like 10 seconds to just put it down so I don't forget? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pooja. So everyone's had a little time to think about it. I don't want to put the pressure on you, Pooja, necessarily to start, but I want to hear, like, what does that trigger for people? Anybody who wants to jump in?
Even I can go. I go very simple. You said so much. I go very, I think if you want the ownership of anyone to take that ownership, they have to be part of the decision making. They have to be part of designing. They have to be part of the safe space where they can raise questions. You've raised a lot of questions. I don't have answers to that, but intrinsically, I think it's human nature. And even you look at it anywhere, right? As a parent, as a professional, whether it's with a child or whether it's with anyone, if they are people who they are not part of this entire journey, or they are not part of this thing, I don't think you're going to go anywhere far. It's not going to be a sustainable thing. It's not really going to address the needs. I think if I sitting here design something, not really as a teacher, and not really roping in, say, a student, not roping in the beneficiary who's part, for whom so-called beneficiary whom I'm creating something, I think it's going to be completely irrelevant. And it may be completely off, and that is what is happening. Why do you think our education system has been going downhill for years together? Because there is somebody whose needs are somewhere, but somebody is creating something completely different. Either it's designing, it's implementation, but there is no real partnership. And that is why we are sitting here to talk about redesigning these things, right? And that is where because we've never heard these voices. Something Jay said earlier, because even in ages back, if we talk about India's Gurukul system, I do understand, I see a lot of benefit in that. But even over there was always power dynamics. But did it really help, in really shifting the education? My learning in my hands. My learning is in my hands. I have everything in me. I just need an external stimulator. And that is whether it's a child, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a father, it's a mother, it's a brother, it's a sister, it doesn't matter. So for me, it's a very natural thing. And maybe it's too simplistic, Stephen, but that's the answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Avinash, I want you all to just jump in, but I want to create space also. Avinash, did you have a reaction to me being the world or to Rajshree's thoughts that you want to share?
So I have a belief, love is the only way, because if a teacher approaches with love, the student is able to sense, feel, embrace, and adapt. And if he approach with violence and violence, the student will retaliate and defend. So what is he learning? He is learning the dealings that the teacher is doing. So the way teacher is behaving with the student, the student is passing on to it to the another generation, that Jay Bhaiya rightly pointed out. It is passing through generation to generation, because love is not being the approach. If love has been the approach, so we would have seen a equal position between teachers and students. There's no playing of the ego, that I am the carrier of responsibility of teaching and they are the receivers. So there's no playing of the ego with love. So when you act with love, that's everything clears out.
Thank you.
Stephen, when I heard you, like the big question came to my mind is that, have we really done our job then? Because like I don't see that teaching really helping our kids or our society at large level. I see a lot of damage has been created, and we are continuing to create those damages. And maybe like with this world, I really want to sit down and have that conversation, that maybe asking them like stories after stories that tell me those success stories, and also pointing out where they have gone wrong, where we as a society have gone wrong. Because I know number of kids uh, who have been rejected by this system, by the same teaching methodology, uh, and like we give them a different kind of tag, and then after tagging those students, they are left out from the system, right? uh, if we see in last 60 years, the society in general have become violent, and where are the roots of this violence? And if you ask me about the roots or the seeds, I will say, like, I'll go back to my schooling system. That's what I have been taught, right? And that's why I value that violence. And it felt like world is like you like very rightly concluded everything, and that's the conversation I have been hearing here. But I think I really want to sit with that world and listen to them. Why do they think so? Are they not being aware that there are millions of children who are left out by the same way of thinking? And maybe after listening to them, and in the process, I remember Sandeep in one of the sessions saying that we need to change the conversation, and that the changing of conversation will only happen if we listen to those people. And maybe what Avinash rightly said, right? Approaching that conversation with the idea of love might uh, help all those teachers. I won't just call teachers, the entire adult section who thinks that children, there is nobody to listen to the kids, they don't know enough, and like all those things you say, right? And maybe it's time where we start sitting with them and having those conversations with them very openly.
Sure.
Well, I think the system is just not working, and that is why, I mean, we have to change it, because you said that children need to learn in school, and like they can't, you can't have quiet classrooms, and that isn't learning, and they have to be like taught. But firstly, the meaning of teaching is changing. Education is all about learning, but what's going on is just instructing, and that's not helping. It's not even effective. What we really need is, the thing is, like, kids these days, when you say that they can't learn for themselves, that's not true, because kids are doing so much these days. I am seeing 16 years old, like Greta Thunberg, for example. She learned that on her own. She observed, and nobody instructed things to her. It didn't. She went out there. She asked questions. She explored, and they're learning so much today, which didn't really come from her system. She was questioning her system. She's outside her school saying, why are we having schools when we're not focusing on what we have to focus on? And it's just saying, yeah, it's just being ineffective right now, and that's what we have to change. And I think, I'm not sure if I understood this wrong, but I think at one point you mentioned, like, the job of the teachers is to protect the students, and providing a safe space means that we can't question power dynamics. Is that what he said, or did I?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So the thing is, that is really ironic to what a safe space means, because in a safe space, you are allowed to question, and it's not wrong, because it's through questioning that we're learning. And if we're not given that space, then we can't help like the next generations, and we can't help what everyone is expecting, like the school children, to bring forward for future generations, if nothing is being useful at this point, and we're resenting learning. And yeah, that's thoughts I had.
Thank you, everybody. I have to tell you, it's been a hard few months, I'm sure, for all of us. I'll speak personally for me. The world feels heavy, and this conversation is about the most hopeful I've felt through this. And I want to use, Pooja, your eloquent points and what everyone said to pivot from, like, you know, if part one of this was the gray part of the sunshine, let's get to the sunshine part. So what happens from here? For me, I sort of want to respond to the world that I was embodying myself as a pivot to this, because I feel sort of dirty having said that out loud. I am so inspired by everything you all are saying, and I think what we're talking about here, I think it's an existential question of humanity. I think it's a survival question. The challenges that we as humans on planet Earth have are getting more intense. They don't have borders. Climate change, intolerance, like pandemics. We need to solve some problems. And right now, we have our greatest asset for solving humanity's problems are the children in classrooms, and those classrooms are built to suppress their critical thinking and problem solving. Like, this seems like the most central question for the survival of humanity on this planet is, how could our classrooms reflect what we actually need in the world, which is creative, problem-solving, collective leadership. And it's not only that we're not doing that, we're inhibiting that in classrooms. So what do we do, right? What are the bright spots? I'm again going to try to just leave this open, but I'll call on people. But, like, can we just think for a moment about how can we make a shift toward this world of partnership? What have you seen that's helpful to do that? Again, I love concrete stories. What does that partnership look like in action in your experience? What does it look like when kids and educators are working together? How can we move from the world I was describing to the world that we want to have? Let's get constructive here and get to the sunshine part. How do we do this? What if I ask to start with you and then everyone else will jump in after that? When you just think like, how do we move forward? How do we make the shift? What comes to mind?
Like, were you asking me?
I would love to hear I was asking Jai.
Oh, right, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I think for me is how do we move forward is probably just sitting with those children. What I have learned in last 7 years, that's very limited experience with children as well. Like nothing in comparison to Rajshri Didi, and even for that matter, you as well. But what I have learned is that kids have more courageous dream to see and also passion to follow that. And how do we really sit with them and understand their dreams and encourage them to like follow that passionately? And like, just to give you an example, I think kids here in community from last 2 years have been working on this very crazy idea of fun school, which is, can we really redesign the schools? And as part of that, what they do is in the first year, 9 children, like they came together and they thought, let's design a school of our dreams and implement it and see if it works or it doesn't work. And that year they enrolled 60 children. They took the role of student teachers, where they were teaching simultaneously learning as well. It's entirely managed by children. So there was not even a single adult who was there. I was the only adult, like just being very honest, but my job was more to be at the gate and playing that role of safe, like watchman, I would say. And I call myself watchman of the fun school. And then second year, like they did that, they learned from their mistakes. And then second year, I saw a much more evolved version of their own schooling, where the team grew from 9 to 19. Number of kids grew, number of activities, the way they taught grew. In that process, they spoke to the private schools and government schools of the community to get the venue. They went to the local politician to get the permission. They raised the funds. They managed almost everything. And what I saw a huge change in them is, one, that big realization that teaching is not easy thing to do, right? So suddenly they had a lot of respect for their educators, their teachers. So that empathy got built, right? Like what I see is majority of our children are being very angry with the education system, with their teachers. But those 2 years and 2 years of the experiment, I think that built empathy in them. A lot of teachers in communities saw these kids teaching, and that built that partnership. Oh, these kids can actually teach. They have the talent. And then I think like things started moving forward, right? So like that's what I shared in the beginning as well. Once you show people what can happen, like I like everyone is human being and everybody wants to be good, wants to feel good at the end of the day. Nobody wants to feel bad. Nobody wants to intentionally create damage to any of the things. It's all the damages are unintentional in nature. If we show them that things can be achieved, things can be done with a better way, in a better way, and kids can be our partner in the work. Like, how do we see them as a huge helping hand for us, not just taking that whole responsibility of teaching the kids, and kids' job is to learn, but how do we really start learning together, right? So my job probably as an educator in class changes from probably from a teacher to most experienced learner, I can call. Maybe I'm little more experienced learner than the kids, but at the end of the day, all of us are learners. So I think these perspective shifts, but most importantly, I would emphasize more on is we really have to show them the way that things can be done, and exposing them to all the good stories across the world, all the stories of good, like excellent teachers across the world who are doing amazing work. And how can we bring those stories? How can we really make people watch those stories, make people read about those teachers, and maybe in that process, a lot of shift can happen.
Jai. Who else, panelists, want to jump in? Really appreciate that. Like this notion of, I heard you talking about showing, just experimenting and doing it and showing it's possible. I heard in there, Jai, some unlearning, like change perspective. I'm going to come back to that, but someone put in the chat, like, what if becoming a teacher was not about what you learn, but about what you unlearn? Like, how different would we think about it? Who's next?
Yeah, so I think it's easier for me to speak on this part because I have a really, really good school which truly believes in equal partnership. So it's easier for me to speak for this than for your previous question. I think the key to really bringing in partnership is to just listen and create an environment where we like an environment of respect, understanding, and where we listen to each other. Like Avinash said, like we have to create the loving atmosphere for us to learn, because learning is not just like from teacher to student, but the teachers also have to like should be able to learn something in the process. I can give you an example of what my school does, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. But we, starting from our timetables, we sit and design them together. And each and every single class, the teacher always asks us, this is what I would like to teach you because I would need this much time to help you guys learn this, but how would you want to be taught? What helps you? Would you be in the mood to learn this? It's a bit rainy today. This is a bit heavy concept. It's going to be a bit dull. Would you want to learn it this way? And really the way we function at school is we really listen to our teachers, and our teachers really listen to us. And I think that's helped our learning become very progressive. And like so many examples, I think just creating a space where you can listen and understand helps us bring in that equal partnership.
Thank you, Pooja. What an incredible experience you're having with school. And sadly, it sounds like, I don't know, a foreign planet when you describe that compared to most schools that I have a chance to visit. It's so many not like that. And so often the lines that are drawn around that kind of education have so much to do with class, caste, sometimes gender, like the inequities about how we approach different children through these different paradigms are so stark. Avinash, I'm so curious what you're thinking about as you hear Pooja's description of her school, as you think about, yeah, the sunshine on the other side of the gray that we were talking about. What hope do you have to offer? You gave us love, which might be the headline of the whole thing. What do you see?
Okay, so firstly, all starts with intent, and as Jai Bhaiya pointed out, we need example, we need stories to learn from and understand it really works. So actually giving freedom to students to unleash their potential. So actually allowing students to do what they enjoy, and at the same time also seeing how they are adapting responsibility. For example, in my school, when I was in 10th or 9th grade, we came up with something called as Project IQ. We were planning to uh, take the responsibility of the holistic learning in our school, where we designed 9 extracurricular clubs and led it every Saturday. And the mentors who were leading those clubs were students, and it was completely a student-led initiative. And that trust that the school HM and the teachers showed in us, that students will be able to hold a responsibility of a school, the holistic learning part. So that trust is a big thing that shows both students and educators can run a school. That was one example. Another example is we used to have advisory circles in our schools. It's a space where we learn social emotional learning, we share our thoughts, we share our emotions, we share our vulnerabilities. In that space was owned by teachers and students. In that space, teacher used to share his vulnerabilities, that I am feeling weak, I am feeling down. At the same time, students were also encouraged to share the same. So that's a beautiful and a simple example where both are able to share their vulnerabilities and their success. That's a beautiful example of partnership, I would say.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you. So much hope in this. Rajni, what are you reflecting on as we think about
No, I
what it
think
takes to make this shift?
I think everyone has said a lot. I think a couple of things that I would like to say is it's not just the children or the educators or the HMs or who have to change. I think it's the entire system. It's the entire society which has to change this way of thinking, right? Um, and it starts from me. And I think if everyone takes that ownership, that I need to change, do I believe in it? Do I agree that this is a strong space? We are in this together. I think it starts from there. I think a couple of things which people have, or I think all these people have said is, I think there has to be a deep, we've become so in our schools and in education, we've become so caught up with curriculum that we've actually stopped enjoying the space itself, learning about one another, learning from one another. And I think we need to shift our focus to first building relationship, understanding one another, listening to one another, and then kind of moving to how can this curriculum or whatever it is can be kind of passed on to everyone. So I think for me, it just starts with very simple. Do I understand my child well? Does my child understand me? And I'm equally vulnerable. I'm equally, I have problems. I don't know a lot of things. I have failed multiple times and I show my failure that who is, as a teacher, I'm a human being. And I think when you become a role model, which is, what is a role model? Just being yourself. Like, I am good in so many things and I'm really not good in so many things also. And that's the way children also, life is like this. Because in the end, what is education all about? It's actually kind of bringing, I don't know, it's a space we are creating to help people build, get ready for life. And in life, it's not just this curriculum and academics, it's life skills, it's values, it's love, it's problem solving, it's all these things. And the faster we make the spaces where children become those problem solvers, the faster they will be. And I want to share something very, very interesting is, as we grow older and we have these layers and layers, we start creating these lines, oh, this can be done, this cannot be done, or will that be happening? Children, oh my God, they are so creative. And if we leave ourselves out, they'll come out with one answer after the other. And I know a lot of problem solving has happened. And I'll give you a very interesting example. And this is, of course, 25 years back. I'm giving you an example. When I did an entire project around valuing different religion, and in the end, and we went through different projects and talk about spoken and did entire exercises of different religious books and becoming part of that. Anyway, in the end, one of the child is asking me, okay, so if we've concluded that all religion teach us the same, has the same messages, then why do we have these multiple religions, right? And honestly, in front of those 65 children, I didn't know, why are these different pathways created? One child just stood up, came to the board and showed, upar, like good values. And he said that, if we have and created lines over there, that if we all are walking towards this path and there is only one path, there'll be so much of rush and people will be hitting one another. So we've just created these different pathways so people can walk smoothly within their lines and move on. And I just said, wow, you know. And I think they teach, I mean, I don't know whether it's they teach us. I think we all are learning together in this entire process. One more thing I want to say is that philosophically or technically, if you ask any educator, they will agree that this is the best way to go ahead. I think it fails when it comes to implementation. Either we are not able to, they don't have the patience, or there is so much of pressure, or I don't know. But I think we need to create these spaces where we are talking, these kind of spaces where we are modeling. We have two panelists here who are doing wonderful work. What better example than that? And I think there are many more examples outside. But we need to create these spaces for these discussions to happen. And I truly believe it's not one better than the other. I truly believe it's a partnership, because both need each other equally, if we are talking about this. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Rajyasree. Yeah, I'm seeing so many, because I see people nodding heads and so much validation in the chat. I want to ask a question to everybody. Everybody, whether you're a panelist or not, there's a theme coming up for me here. Like, Pooja, at the very, very beginning, when we talked about why are things like they are, and you talked about students being intimidated, I actually sort of expected you to think, well, teachers do this, or classrooms are set up in this way, but you went to something inside you that got in the way of the different world. And Avinash, when you said, like, what do we need? You talked about internally, love, like how you show up to other people. And Rajyasree, right when you started, you were saying, like, I have to work on what's inside me. I'd like to ask everyone to take just a few seconds and think, what do you, each of us individually probably has a different answer. What are you trying to unlearn in order to be the change that you want to see in the world? What is something you've struggled with, or what from right here, where are you going? And I'm going to ask each panelist to share one thing. What's something that you are working to unlearn, that you've internalized, that gets in the way of this? And I'm going to ask everybody in the chat to give your answer there too. Everyone identify one thing that you are trying, you want to, you've struggled to unlearn, that will help you be the change that you want to see in the world. Just a few seconds of reflection, and we'll get panelists to share some answers. Oh, thank you, Ankit. People are starting to share them. They're kind of painful to hear, right? Like the idea that I need to unlearn the dislike for some subjects that I naturally love, but school has squashed that out of me. Wonderful. Can I ask our panelists, is anybody willing to volunteer to go first? Like, you all think about this stuff a lot. I know you're on journeys. What's something that you have or you want to unlearn to be the change you want to see in the world? Jai, how about you start us off? And then you pick who goes next.
Yeah, I think I have two things which I want to unlearn. One is the whole idea of student-teacher relationship. I think which comes from most of my experience, and it has more of like a static affair, which is not the case, right? Like what I've been experiencing, student-teacher relationship is a very living movement, and I really want to unlearn my old earlier understanding of this relationship, and in the process evolved and reach to a better understanding of this relationship between student and teacher. And two is listening. Like there are times where I listen to react or respond, and I think I really want to unlearn this and listen because I care for what other person is saying. So these are the two things I want to unlearn or work on or learn, whatever you call it. Yeah, thank you.
You pick who's next.
Avinash?
Okay, so I would like to share something for me and for all the students out there. The conditioning which has been done with fear and violence, we need to break that and move out of that shell and share and scream out and say, this is not working with us. We are not happy with our conditioning and it needs to change. So we have to unlearn, we have to come out of that fear zone, that we need to come out and speak out to the world and say this is not working. When a bunch of a mass will come out and speak and say this is something which we think can work and this is not working, can bring a lot of change. And that's I am on that journey where I'm unlearning my own past conditioning, and yeah.
Thank you, Avinash. Pass it on to one of your colleagues here. Let's go to you, Rajshri, next, and then we'll have Pooja after that.
I can go next. I think even I have two things to share, Stephen. One is I need to unlearn this entire fear of maths and science. I think I have such a huge fear of that since the childhood. So I think I need to get over that. The other thing I think is sometimes to make decisions, it's like time is limited. So you just end up making certain decisions, right? So I need to kind of go slow. Though I believe partnerships are so important, I think sometimes you just kind of make certain decisions. So would love to have that patience, stop, wait, listen, invite, involve in that entire decision making before making that decision. So I think just unlearning this part of it.
Well, for me, I think I have to unlearn the idea of respect that I've been like observing all throughout being in school. And respect isn't like keeping quiet while another person is speaking, but it's trying to like understand. So I have to try to understand my teachers rather than just thinking, respect means I just keep quiet and accept everything blindly, everything that they're saying, but you try to understand their opinions. And I don't know if this sounds vague, but it's just that we've been looking at respect so differently, especially like in a lot of schools that I've seen kids mention. So yeah, just the concept of respect, like in the context of schools, I think that is something I have to unlearn and relearn. How do we bring more meaning to that word? And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm gonna turn things back over in just a minute, but first, could we do this? With all love and respect to you all panelists, what's happening in the chat is even better. There is so much insight and wisdom. Let's do this. Could we take 60 seconds to give everyone a chance to scroll up and look and read? And what I'm going to ask you panelists to close us out is to just share one thought as we close up this conversation before I turn it back over. And there's some other things we need to do. There's an exciting website to share and some other things. But as a last thing, I just want you to scroll through and think, what's one thought that you're walking out with that you'll leave to the group? And for a minute or two, let's go back and read what some of the many people who've joined us are saying here. I'm just overwhelmed by how different the world would be if we lived just by what's in that chat. Like, honestly, it would be such a different world. Let me just ask, and I'll randomly pick an order here so you all know what's coming. I just want a closing thought, a question. It can be anything. Avinash, why don't you start us out? We'll just go around Avinash, Rashri, Pooja, and then Jai. What are you feeling or thinking, triggered by or about this conversation at this point that I thought you'd leave us with?
Okay. So what I think is, it's always easy to talk about theories and just give our opinions, but it's very, very difficult to live that theory and live that learning that we had today. So we need to make attempt. We need to take the tiniest step. Uh, for example, my friend Afsar would say that the simplest example of partnership is sharing food. So, uh, so starting with the simplest things and building upon that. So, not just talking about it, but living that teaching.
Thank you. Rashri, how about you next? We'll go to Jai and then Pooja.
I live and I hope, I have huge hope that this is the entire partnership, or what we call revolutionizing this entire education system, is possible. I think these are the first steps. I think with a lot of love, with a lot of understanding from teachers as well as students, understanding each other, understanding and knowing each other at the retail level, I think this is possible. And I think this is the first step. So I just want to live with the thought that let's continue having these discussions. Let's continue bringing people. Let's celebrate small steps. And Delhi is not dur, is what I would say. In basically, it's not far. The goal is not far for people who haven't understood. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rajshri Didi and Avinash, for sharing. I think what I want to leave with is one, definitely I do see a time when a lot of students or like kids like Pooja and Avinash will be here, and maybe I will be in the audience. That's the hope I'm getting. And at the same time, I'm leaving, like just to share an end thought, which Gandhiji used to share a lot, is that the greatest power human being is not to change the world, but the greatest power human being has is to change himself or herself. And I think that's what I want to live with, probably be the change which we want to see in others and the world around us. Thank you.
So from this discussion, I think we've all learned how integral it is to create, like how safe spaces are integral for learning. And I just want to be more conscious about, am I even creating the safe space that I'm talking about for my teachers, for them to learn? Am I providing them that space? And it's just thinking about the whole concept of, yeah, like again, back to love, understanding, respect, and just making education mutually exclusive. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you. I know this isn't over, but it's just a moment when I want to hand it back to Shanak. But I just, like, from a very personal space, I want to say to you all that like feeling the hope and optimism from this conversation means a lot to me at a time when the world is so hard and we've got so many challenges. Like, I feel like this is the medicine that I personally need and really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you everyone in the chat. Let me turn it over to Shanaka, who has some exciting things to share for us that will help this conversation keep going, I think.